They wore white coats. They took oaths to save lives. But behind the sterile walls of hospitals, they quietly became killers. What drives a doctor or nurse to murder the very people who trust them most? Before we move on to the next part, please give me a like and subscribe to the channel. Thank you for listening. Imagine going to your doctor for a routine checkup. You sit down, roll up your sleeve, and feel a needle slide into your arm. You don't know it yet, but that injection isn't meant to heal you. It's meant to end you, and the person who gives it? Calm, reassuring, and deadly. This is not the plot of a psychological thriller. It's real. It happened. And in Britain, two names turned that horror into history: Harold Shipman and Beverly Allitt, a respected general practitioner and a young pediatric nurse, both trained to care, trusted to heal. Both turned that trust into a weapon. Harold Shipman practiced medicine in Hyde, a quiet town near Manchester. Over more than 2 decades, he built a reputation as a kind, reliable family doctor. But behind closed doors, he was systematically killing his patients, mostly elderly women, by injecting them with lethal doses of diamorphine, a powerful opioid. It wasn't just the act of murder that chilled investigators. It was the cold precision. He filled out death certificates himself. He altered medical records to hide the signs. He even comforted grieving families, knowing he'd caused their loss. Then there's Beverly Allitt. In 1991, she worked in the children's ward at Grantham and Kesteven Hospital. Over just 59 days, she attacked 13 children. 4 died, 9 survived, but many with permanent damage. Her weapon of choice wasn't morphine, it was insulin, potassium chloride, and suffocation. Unlike Shipman, Allitt didn't hide her chaos. Cardiac arrests spiked, emergencies piled up, yet she remained at the center of it all, always the one trying to help, always there when the alarms went off. 2 medical professionals, 2 faces of betrayal. One kills quietly over years, the other in a blur of violence, but the damage they caused ripples far beyond their victims. It struck at the heart of something deeper, our belief that those who wear the white coat are safe, are good, are incapable of harm. These were not random acts of violence. They were deliberate, sustained, and committed by people who understood life well enough to know exactly how to take it away. What made them do it? And who, between them, was the more dangerous? That's the question we'll follow next. Let's take a closer look at how these 2 killers operated, their methods, their minds, and the motives that turned caregivers into executioners. Harold Shipman didn't act in bursts. He moved with method, patience, and calculation. From 1975 to 1998, he killed at least 215 people, though some experts believe the real number may exceed 250. That makes him not only Britain's most prolific serial killer, but one of the deadliest in modern history. And yet, for over 2 decades, he remained untouched. His victims were elderly, mostly women, many of them living alone. Their deaths, on the surface, looked natural. He would visit them at home, chat politely, and inject a fatal dose of diamorphine. The deaths came quietly. No screaming, no struggle, no suspicion. He chose victims who wouldn't be missed quickly. Then, with the authority of his white coat, he signed their death certificates himself. He even suggested cremation to families, destroying physical evidence before it could raise questions. In several cases, he falsified medical records after the patient died, creating a false medical history that justified sudden decline. Shipman didn't just kill, he erased the trail. That's what made him so dangerous. The system wasn't just fooled, it was weaponized, turned into a cover for murder. In contrast, Beverly Allitt's crimes burned fast and left chaos in their wake. In just under 2 months, in 1991, she attacked 13 children at Grantham and Kesteven Hospital. Some were only months old. The patterns were chilling. Babies who had been stable suddenly went into cardiac arrest. Others stopped breathing with no medical explanation. But the one thing all these cases had in common? Beverly Allitt was always there. Unlike Shipman, Allitt didn't choose her victims for invisibility. She created emergencies and inserted herself into them. Experts believe she suffered from Munchausen syndrome by proxy, a psychiatric disorder where a caregiver harms others to draw attention and praise to themselves. She poisoned children with insulin or potassium, induced respiratory failure, then played the hero as medical teams rushed in. But some children didn't survive. 4 died, and many who lived suffered permanent brain damage or disability. The psychological gap between these two killers is wide. Shipman showed signs of narcissism and control. He wanted to decide who lived and who died, often without any emotional connection to his victims. His approach was detached, almost mechanical. There were no pleas for attention, no dramatics. He didn't seek recognition. In fact, he thrived on being unnoticed. Allitt, on the other hand, thrived on crisis. Her killings weren't hidden so much as confused, buried under panic and urgency. She created a problem only she could solve, then basked in the praise that followed. She craved visibility. In her world, being needed meant being loved, even if it meant hurting others to get there. And yet, for all their differences, both Shipman and Allitt exploited the same fundamental truth. Patients don't expect to be harmed by their caregivers. The trust placed in medical professionals runs so deep that when things go wrong, people rarely suspect foul play, especially from the person holding the syringe. But while method and motive set them apart, the damage they left behind would ripple outward in ways that no hospital or courtroom could contain. The next question isn't just how they did it, but how far the consequences reached, and which of them left a darker stain on the system meant to protect us all. After the crimes were exposed, the shock wasn't just about the number of victims. It was the realization that these murders had happened under the very eyes of the system, that both Harold Shipman and Beverly Allitt had operated freely, unnoticed, within institutions designed to protect life, and that no one, colleagues, superiors, families, had caught them in time. Shipman's danger didn't lie only in his body count, staggering as it was. It lay in how perfectly he manipulated the rules of the medical system to become invisible. As a general practitioner, he held authority over life and death decisions. He signed death certificates, he prescribed controlled drugs, and he used that authority to cover up his crimes for over 2 decades. No red flags were raised until 1998, when the family of a healthy 81-year-old woman, Kathleen Grundy, questioned the suddenness of her death and the unusual will she supposedly left, naming Shipman as the sole beneficiary. That one misstep cracked open the case, but by then, hundreds were already gone. An inquiry led by Dame Janet Smith followed, known as the Shipman Inquiry. It uncovered systemic failures across the NHS, no cross-checks for death rates among doctors, poor tracking of morphine prescriptions, and an over-reliance on professional trust. In response, sweeping reforms were made, monitoring tightened, procedures changed, but the damage to families, to trust, to the idea of medical infallibility was already done. Allitt's crimes caused panic of a different kind. Unlike Shipman, whose victims were elderly, her victims were babies and toddlers, some too young to speak, all completely helpless. After her arrest, the hospital faced national outrage. Parents feared leaving their children alone in hospital rooms. Nurses were scrutinized, protocols were overhauled, but the questions remained. How had she gone unnoticed for so long? How many children could have been saved if someone had acted sooner? Psychiatrists diagnosed Allitt with several disorders, among them Munchausen by proxy and a severe personality disorder. She was declared mentally unfit to stand trial in a conventional court and was instead sentenced to indefinite detention at Rampton Secure Hospital, where she remains to this day. Shipman, in contrast, was convicted of 15 murders in 2000 and sentenced to life imprisonment without parole. He died by suicide in 2004, hanging himself in his prison cell. When comparing danger, it's easy to point to numbers. Shipman killed more. His crimes stretched over decades. But danger isn't just about quantity. Allitt's victims were children. The emotional, cultural, and psychological impact of that is enormous, and the fact that her actions were rooted in a psychiatric disorder, one that craved chaos and crisis, makes her threat unpredictable. Shipman was calculating, Allitt was unstable. One concealed, the other disrupted, but both, in their own way, shattered the core assumption that medical professionals are always safe. They proved that evil doesn't always wear a mask. Sometimes it wears a stethoscope. Looking back, perhaps what's most disturbing is how ordinary they appeared. A quiet doctor, a young nurse. Nothing about them screamed danger until it was far too late. And that's the legacy they leave behind. Not just the lives they ended, but the trust they stole from everyone who ever believed that the hospital was a place only for healing. Their stories are more than historical horror. They're a warning. That blind trust, even in the hands of professionals, is not always protection. That institutions can fail, and that sometimes, to see the real danger, we have to look past the uniform and into the human behind it. Two healers turned into harbingers of death. One cold and calculated, the other chaotic and craving attention. But which is more dangerous, the one who hides in plain sight, or the one who strikes in chaos? If this story made you question what we assume about trust, care, and authority, make sure to like, subscribe, and hit the bell for more true crime cases that challenge what we think we know. And tell us in the comments, who do you think posed the greater threat, Harold Shipman or Beverly Allitt? And how much trust should we really place in those sworn to protect us?